yesterday, and all of the problems yesterday we were given. We're always given two angles, so we always find the third angle. What's going to make it different today? So the thing that we're adding is this case 2 here. Is we are going to be able to solve a triangle that has two sides given and one of the opposite angles given. So the abbreviation side angle. And this is the one of the side angle sides. All those. This is the one that the acronym is. Just remember it, I guess, because it's a bad word to spell the other way. So, that's how you write it. Side angle, not in reverse. So like you generally use this in geometry when you did like proofs. So you would say like two triangles that congruent to each other, or you would like give the congruent symbol because of like side angle. That's something like that. Yeah, the same abbreviations, but a little bit different take on it. Yeah, you're right. That is something that you would have learned. You would have learned like side angle, side, angle. I think it was one side was one of them. So those were different abbreviations used. Yeah, so we're using that that fact, right? So in this case, we're saying if we're given a side, and then an angle. So like, let's say for instance, this is our triangle here. It's our ABC triangle. And maybe we're given the fact that this is 10, this is 12, and maybe this is like, let's say 85 degrees. So we're given a side, and an angle. Here are two sides and an angle. And one of the angles is going to be opposite of one of the sides. So we're going to be given a pair. Always be given a pair. The thing that makes this different is everything that we did yesterday and on that quiz, we were given another angle. So we're always solving for a side first, right? So when we do this, we're going to be solving for an angle first. We're going to be solving for a big C or a big A as a first step, which means we have to do a little bit different calculator steps here. But this is going to be our scenario, two sides and one angle, as opposed to yesterday we always had two angles and one side. So let's go ahead and try our first example here. We're still going to be solving the triangle. To solve it means to find all of the angles and all of the sides. So let's draw a picture, represent what we've got. I want to do this. You're going to have to do this for all the problems here. There's just 4 problems that you have to do tonight, but you're going to need to draw a picture for all of them. And go ahead and label the little ones, little a opposite of big A, little b opposite of big B, and little c is opposite of big C. So we want to draw that every time. Triangle ABC. Little letters go opposite of the big letters. Now let's go ahead and write what we've got. Big A is 50 degrees. Little a is 3, and little b is 2. So the first thing you need to do is figure out which one are we going to try to find. There's only one of these. We got 3 remaining, right? There's only one of them that you're going to be able to solve for first. Which one would that be? Well, we know big A and little a already, right? So big B, yeah. Big B will be the one, because we're always going to have 4 things, and we can only have one of them that we don't know. So let's start with our A, sine of 50 over 3 equals, and here's where it's a bit different. Instead of having the sine of some angle over a little b, we're going to actually have the sine of big B over a number for little b, which is 2. So yesterday, everything was solving for that. We always knew the angle. The beginning process is going to be the same. We're going to cross multiply. So here. generally just always start with the top of this one. So when you multiply a sine of 50 times 2, the way that you're going to want to write this is 2 sine 50. It's just, you always just going to write whatever number you're multiplying in front of that sign. You wouldn't write it like sine 50. You could do this times 2, but it's just a little bit more confusing. The best way to write it is just 2 sine 50. The 2 does not multiply times the 50. It's not sine of 100. It doesn't work that way. It's 2 sine 50. And then over here, 3 times the sine of b is going to be 3 sine b. So same step so far, right? Now, we're going to do the same step we did yesterday. We got to get the b by itself is the goal. So we should divide by 3 first, right? So we got 3. Agree? Sounds logical, right? So let's cancel. So here we've got 2 sine of 50 degrees divided by 3. But we've still got this sine of big B over here. And we got to get rid of that sine somehow, because we can't just leave that as an answer. We got to get the b all by itself. Anybody know how to do that? How do we get rid of the sine? Yeah. Multiply by the cosecant. So the thing with doing that, that's a good idea because cosecant is the opposite of sine. That's a good thought. Like you could actually do the cosecant of it, maybe would work. But you can't necessarily multiply by anything because these trig functions, they're kind of different in that they have to have something sort of plugged into them. This just cosecant by itself can't exist. It has to have like an x or a 1 or something. It has to have something that goes into it. It can't just exist as just CSC. That doesn't exist. In the same way that like just sine doesn't exist. It's got to have the sign of something. So you'll see on your calculator that when you type in sine, it actually puts a parenthesis there. Because there has to be something that's sort of plugged into that function. So the thought of, yeah, that's a good thought of like the cosecant idea.
Can you plug in the 1?
You plug in a 1?
Yeah.
Well, you can, but
Maybe
you can't just really plug in whatever you want because the sign of 1 is the value. But it's a good thought. So probably the most common thought would be, well, let's divide by something, right? Let's divide by something. Now don't write this yet. But the thing is, you can't divide by a sign because again, a sign has to have something plugged into it. It's a function. Okay? So this is not something that you can do. So what we actually have to get rid of it, if you look at your calculator, if you look at the sign button, right there above it in blue, there's a little sign with a little -1 up there. That's called the inverse sign. So the inverse is the opposite of sine. So what you do is you do the inverse sign of this whole thing. Okay. And we also have to do the same thing on both sides. So you do the inverse sign of this whole thing. Basically, that whole function gets plugged into the inverse sign. And what happens when you do the inverse sign of the regular sign is they cancel. They're opposites of each other. So these two things wipe each other out. The inverse sign of sine disappears, and then that would just be. So again, this is called the inverse sign. So to solve for an angle, we're always going to be using that inverse sign to do that. Now it looks complicated, right? It looks like a big old thing, but we're going to be using our calculator, and it's really not bad because the calculator does all this hard work for you. You're just going to type it in like this. You're just going to do seconds with the second button, second sign, and so I'd like to give you a parenthesis. Then let's go ahead and do another. We're going to do this whole big fraction. So we'll do another parenthesis, 2 sine. Going to give you another parenthesis, so 50. You don't have to put in the degree signs. We'll close parentheses for this, close it for the whole top, divided by 3, close your parentheses. That's what you're going to type in. So make sure you're closing the parentheses at the end. Make sure you have a match for each of your parentheses. So it'll work. And if you did that all right, plugged it in, you should get 30.71. As your big B. Well, so I've got 1, 2, 3 open ones, and then a 1, 2, 3 closed ones. Always be. I put an extra one so it gives you this one automatically, and then I put an extra one for the numerator. You don't actually have to. It should work fine without that, but it's just a good habit to always put your fractions in parentheses. Yeah, it'll give you the right answer if you want to omit that one. If you want to take this one out, if you want to take that one out and take that one out. So now that we've got that, it ends up being the same idea we had yesterday. We still got to get 2 more things, big C and little c. The easiest one to get next would be what? Yeah, big C. Because we know these 2 angles, so then we just do 180 minus to get big C. 180 minus 50 minus 30.71. That'll give us big C. And we're getting 99.29 big C. Now our last step, we have to go back again to what we did yesterday. Get this little c. Then start here like we did with the other one. We're going to take the ratio that we're given, the sine 50 over 3. Equals. Now we're trying to find little c, so we're going to use big C. The sine of big C, which is 99.29 over little c. And then we go through the same process we did yesterday and what we did in the quizzes, which is cross multiply. So sine of 50 MC equals 3 sine of 99.29, and then divide by the sine 50. The last one. And we'll type all that in. Anybody get an answer for little c? Yeah. There we go. There's a lot happening there. I know it looks kind of confusing when you see all those numbers and stuff. Last thing we'd want to do is check and make sure this makes sense. Find the biggest angle, which is here 99.29. It should be opposite the biggest side, which it is. The 186 is the biggest. The smallest angle, 330.71, is opposite the smallest side, that's 2. So it seems like it should work. Seems like those are right because they make sense in the proportion. So you're going to follow these steps for any of these problems. We'll go ahead and do another one together here. But the big difference is this inverse, bringing that in, inverse. And we'll be using that when we do the law of cosines too. So let's try a similar one here. Go ahead and draw your triangle for it. Got our ABC. Let's go ahead and label those. We got 100, 5, and so what are we going to solve for first in this one? Big what? Let's see. Because we're given our pair of B's, we're given one of the C's, so we got to find the other C. So we'll start with our pair. We know sine of 100 over 5 equals the sine of big C over 3. Set up. But then we'll go ahead and cross multiply. 3 times sine 100, 3 sine 100. 5 times sine C is just 5 sine C. And then from here, first thing we want to do is get rid of that 5. So we can divide by that first. And then, rather than rewrite it all twice, we're going to use our C is equal to the inverse sine of this. So inverse sine, which sine will equal -1. I'll write inverse sine. And this whole thing, 3 sine of 100 over 5. So we're going to type in that whole thing into our calculator. Make sure you can do that. Try that on your own. Make sure you know how to plug that in and get all the right parentheses and all that. If you did it right, you should get like 36.23 or sorry, 22. Now the easiest one to get, which is the third angle, that's going to be A. So big A is going to be 180 minus the other two. So minus 100 minus 36.2. Get our big A. $43.78. And then our last step there is going to be a little a, so we're going to use the same ratio we started with, just like what we did yesterday. Sine of 100 over 5 equals sine of our big A, 43.78 over little a. Then cross multiply. A times sine 100 is just A sine 100 equals 5 sine of 43.78. And then lastly, we want to divide by the sine of 100. Plug that in here. I got 5 points, actually 3.5. And it is always a good idea to just check and make sure everything matches up. We got 100, that's opposite of 5, so that's good. And then the other, the smallest one is 36.22, and that's opposite of 3, which is the smallest side. Seems like we're all good. But last one, what I want you to do is just try the first step of this, and just on your own. Make sure you got it. So with this one, with the inverse, making sure you can get that inverse. We got a lot of practice on the rest of it. And these can be kind of long problems that we need a little time to work on in class. So we got our B and B. So we want to do sine of 20 over 4 equals our sine of the big C over 6. And then just go ahead and solve for big C there. See, make sure you can do that on your own. Try to solve for big C. We don't have to do the whole problem. We'll just do that first step. Everybody go to the answers? Yeah. On our problems, you do have to get all the rest of them, but just make sure you can get that, and then you would find the other angle, and then the exact. So your problems, you've got 4 of them to do tonight. They're online already too, so you can go ahead and check it out. If you want to pull that up, 26, 28, 30, and 36. And then those are due by Friday.